What did Brittany say again?
It's been a while. I know I shouldn't have kept you waiting.
Okay, seriously, I can't find my triangle, okay? I can't find my triangle. I can't find her, okay? Regrets, etc., etc. Part 1, Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. And because of Miss Ariana Grande, I'm hearing a lot of chirping about she's this generation's Elizabeth Taylor. How dare you? People just talk. What about that one guy that said that Taylor Swift was like this generation's Michael Jackson? You can't, why can't Taylor be this generation's Taylor? You know what I mean? Let's leave Elizabeth Taylor out of it. Now, before we continue, can you do me the favor and Google, stop what you're doing, and Google who Elizabeth Taylor was dating when she died? Go ahead. Yeah, that's my girl. Untouchable. She was dating Colin Farrell. Yeah, that one. Look at that Britney connection, huh? When Colin and Britney made out on the red carpet, they shared gum. Also, to the people of my past, I'd like to apologize for saying that I love Colin Firth in Phone Booth and Colin Farrell in Pride and Prejudice. That was my bad. But I only know 2 Collins, so. Also, because I'm a water sign, I can see things coming. I already know I'm going to get Debbie Reynolds in the comments a lot. What Elizabeth did was not cool. Is she an icon? Yes. Sadly, 2 things can be true, okay? Debbie Reynolds was married to an Eddie Fisher, and Elizabeth Taylor was on her 3rd marriage with Mike Todd, okay? And they were all friends. And Mike Todd died in a plane accident, so Eddie Fisher ran, according to Carrie Fisher, who said this. Carrie Fisher revealed that her father sought to comfort a grieving Taylor and rushed to her side, gradually moving to her front. So I do know that she stole Debbie Reynolds' man. I do know that. But we're focusing on Richard. First, a little background. Miss Elizabeth Rosamond Taylor is a Pisces, Sun, Mercury, and Mars. Literally a dream. Scorpio moon, Aries Venus. Love it. Oh, dangerous. And Richard is a Scorpio, Virgo, Capricorn, Venus in Capricorn, and Mercury in Sag. So, obsession and conflict. Also the power dynamics, like, why can't we just do things my way? I've already imagined how this is going to go. And the other person saying, this does not work for me. If this does not work for me, it's not going to work for anybody. You know what I mean? Elizabeth Taylor was born in London to American parents. Her dad was an art dealer, and her mother was a stage actress. Both originally from Kansas. In 1939, the Taylors ran from Europe because they were scared of impending war. Actually, the United States ambassador to the UK was Joseph P. Kennedy, father to JFK and RFK, called her dad, Francis, and urged them to come back to the United States. That's insider info. So they settled in Beverly Hills, California. Elizabeth Taylor is so stunning and so gorgeous and so stunningly gorgeous that people would beg her mom to get her into the entertainment industry. They would literally stop her on the street and be like, your daughter is stunning. Relatable, because walking the streets of Coral Gables looking like me. Elizabeth Taylor's eyes are talked about a lot. A lot of people argue that they were violet. A lot of people argue that they were gray violet. But God has favorites. Purple eye, striking. Also, poor Elizabeth was a mutant. She had a rare genetic mutation of having 2 rows of eyelashes. God, you're so strong. She starts her career with Universal Pictures, and the studio had a hard time putting her in kids' films because everybody was like, she doesn't talk like a kid, she doesn't look like a kid, she doesn't have the eyes of a kid, she's already like a grown woman. Now that I say that out loud, it does sound gross. Taylor later said that it was because she was so direct and unafraid of telling people what she wanted. Yeah, well, if I had 2 rows of eyelashes, I'd probably be a different girl too. She was with Universal, and then she got the contract for Lassie over at MGM. Did you know that the guy from Scandal, Olivia Pope's boyfriend, the president, his dad, like, he's part of the MGM family? Not anymore, though. They, like, sold it. He's not, like, part of it. I had to Google that because I saw him striking with SAG. And I was like, Scoozy, but I gave it a Google. You're good with me, bro. It's all good. Elizabeth Taylor was already a very successful actress by the time she was 14. Well, it really took off when she was 14. This is a really good movie called National Velvet, and here she is pictured with Mickey Rooney, who's also in Breakfast at Tiffany's, but that character is not the best. Moving on. Around the age of 15, the studio wanted her to go out to parties and start dating people and get like really part of the scene. And she was like being constantly taken advantage of by older men. Actually, side note, Mickey Rooney was married to a 24-year-old girl, and Elizabeth Taylor is 15 years old here. And his now ex-wife caught them together, and that's what led to Mickey Rooney's divorce. Also, after Elizabeth Taylor died, her best friend said that when she was 15, she would go to the actor Ronald Reagan's house and spend the night. And Ronald Reagan was 38 years old when she was 15. Elizabeth Taylor has talked a lot throughout her life about how much she mourns a childhood. And that's why she became best friends with Michael Jackson. Talking about this woman's life is crazy. But she was Michael Jackson's best friend, and they would talk on the phone nonstop, apparently. And they would try to do silly things together and be kids again together because they both missed their childhoods. So crazy. Her first marriage, so her first marriage was to Conrad Hilton Jr., who he was 24, she was 18, and that's Paris Hilton's grandfather's brother. So it's Paris Hilton's great uncle. And she did change her name to Elizabeth Hilton. She'd already been engaged to 2 other people by that time, though, like a billionaire and then a football player. Glenn Davis and Bill Pauley. Within a few weeks of getting married, Elizabeth Taylor was like, oh no, I made a huge mistake. He is so abusive and he's an alcoholic. Listen to this. But on a 3-month European honeymoon, the two fought hard. Hilton bristled when called Mr. Taylor, preferring all-night gambling to his bride's canasta games with the Duchess of Windsor. And the Duchess of Windsor was an American socialite that married the Duke of Windsor, and it was like a huge scandal. Okay. I say it every series. I'm going to say it again. How can you not like pop culture? Hello. Pop culture is way beyond Ariana and, oh, Squidward, you do like Krabby Patty. Okay, so MGM. This is important, okay? I'm giving you the backstory. I want you to walk around the earth full of knowledge in your noggin, okay? Do I know how to calculate the tip? No. Do I know what MGM did to Elizabeth Taylor? Yes. They punished her. They punished her for divorcing Conrad Hilton. Why? Because they used that wedding as a promotional tool. They had like 600 guests at that wedding. They had like 3,000 fans wait outside. It was like this huge, huge thing. They spent a shit ton of money on it. So they put her, in 1951, they put her in this movie. They called her like B-roll movie or whatever. Love is Better Than Ever. Comes out in 1952. So Elizabeth Taylor and MGM are fighting, okay? Even though she re-signs for a 7-year contract. And she re-signs for a 7-year contract with MGM because she's recently married again to Michael Wilding, an English actor who's 20 years older than her. And she agreed to sign again as long as they increased her pay. So her pay went from $4,000 a month to $47,000 a month. Sorry, a week. Damn. So even though she was making more money, the studio had more control over her now more than ever. So being with somebody like Conrad Hilton Jr. made her want a different lifestyle and live a different lifestyle and also never depend on a man again, but also, you know, made her kind of dependent on the studio. So it's 1953. Elizabeth Taylor is married to Michael, and she is pregnant with her first child. She gets invited to this party in Bel Air to celebrate the success of The Robe, starring a Richard Burton. This is the first time Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor would meet. When asked if she remembers her first impression of Richard Burton, this is what Elizabeth Taylor has to say. Rather full of himself, I seem to remember that he never stopped talking, and I had given him the cold fish eye. Do I know what that means? No. To me, it sounds cross-eyed. Doesn't matter. But this story is easily one of the greatest love stories of Hollywood history. And I will continue in part 2. Okay, part 2. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. We're still on husband number 2. So she has 2 sons. with our British guy, okay? She has Michael in 1953 and Christopher in 1955. And it's rumored that during this time, she also had an affair with Frank Sinatra. She's killing them. She's killing strike after strike after strike. She's bowling a 300. 1957, they get divorced. In the 1950s, she's thriving. She's a critically acclaimed actress. She is a serious deal in Hollywood. This is also when movies start to feel serious heat in the competition with television. In the late 1950s, she was also nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. 1957, divorce. 1958, marries Mike Todd. Mike Todd's best man is Eddie Fisher, and Elizabeth Taylor's maid of honor is Debbie Reynolds. So Mike Todd was a little ham. He loved attention, and this is Elizabeth Taylor's great first love of her life. Kill me. Imagine being Conrad or Mr. UK. Sucks to hear. But she says this: God, I loved him, my self-esteem, my image, everything soared under his exuberant, loving care. He was 25 years older than her. The dates are a little messy because she does get a divorce in 1958, but she's already married and pregnant with this child in February 1957. So she was never going to leave one until she already had one in the waiting room. Her bench was always packed. August 6, 1957, Liza Todd is born. Liza Minnelli. If you watch SNL, the lamp. Oh, I just gotta turn off this lamp. Hello. In March 1958, Mike Todd dies in a plane crash on a plane named the Liz. Ugh. Although she was devastated, she returns to work 3 weeks later. I'm going to read this directly from an article. During the production of one of her movies, Taylor's personal life drew more attention when she began an affair with singer Eddie Fisher, whose marriage to actress Debbie Reynolds had been idealized by the media as the union of, quote-unquote, America's sweethearts. Here they are again. Okay. Reynolds and Fisher were in a seemingly happy marriage with 2 children, one of whom is Carrie Fisher, who's Princess Leia, who's Billy Lord's mom from Scream Queens and other... Okay, she's amazing. Okay, and until he blindsided the actress Debbie Reynolds and left her for her best friend, Elizabeth Taylor. Previously, in 1957, at Taylor's wedding to Mike Todd, Eddie Fisher was the best man and Reynolds was matron of honor to Taylor, showing how close the 2 couples were before Todd's death and the subsequent affair. Now open your ears. They were so close that when Debbie Reynolds gave birth to a son in 1958, he was given the name Todd in honor of the friendship. So Eddie Fisher named his son after his best friend who passed away and then slept with his wife. And Todd Fisher is his name. After Mike Todd's tragic accident, Fisher flew to Taylor's side to comfort her, and a month later, for 4 Saturdays, separated from Reynolds to be solely with Taylor. So when I say Ariana Grande could never be Elizabeth Taylor, because this is insane. And you know what else? Elizabeth Taylor is an incredible actress. So you can imagine what this did to Elizabeth Taylor's image, breaking up 2 of America's sweethearts. She went from, oh my God, incredible actress like Meryl, I love you, Meryl Streep, to America's homewrecker. However, Elizabeth Taylor and Debbie Reynolds would later on in their lives mend their friendship and become friends again. And I will say this, when it comes to every best friend and boyfriend scenario, it's never how could the boyfriend do it, it's how could the girl, okay? So once they get over that, back together. I've seen it more than 4 times. Moving on to Richard Burton, okay? He's from Wales. He was born November 10th, 1925. His mother was a barmaid. His father was a coal miner, blue collar. He was the 12th of 13 children. That woman should have taken a nap, pobrecita. Richard was quoted saying that his father was a 12 pints a day man. I recently discovered that it's pints, not pints. So that explains those dates that I had. Okay. Thanks for never calling. You could have just told me I said it wrong. His father was a drinker and a gambler and sometimes wouldn't show up for weeks. And Richard always ended it with, and he very much looked like me. He's the first member of his family to go to high school. He worked all of his educational career, whatever, his scholastic run by delivering newspapers, delivering messages, and hauling horse poop. Even though he came from this blue-collar family where everybody had to pull their weight to support each other, he was always extremely interested in poetry and theater. He had a teacher named Philip Burton that taught him about literature and music and opened his world, and that's why he changed his stage name to Richard Burton after that teacher. In 1943, he wins a scholarship to Oxford. He moves from theater to Hollywood. He's in a gothic romance called My Cousin Rachel. I haven't seen it, but I have an idea of what happens. Okay. Because of sleeping with My Cousin Rachel, he wins a Golden Globe Award for Best New Actor and an Academy Award nomination. He is so in demand that in 1953, he signs a 7-year contract for $1 million. And in today's money, that is $10 million. Olive, my research assistant that we love and adore, has an asterisk. And I always read her asterisk. I always read her stars. He did more theater work in London and was praised by the likes of Winston Churchill. Side note, this is another one of those weird time warps. The same year, the double helix structure of DNA was discovered, and the next year, Elvis Presley started his music career. Thank you, Olive. You're right, pop culture is fascinating. After signing his contract, Richard continues to star in various films, each one doing worse than its last. Damn. He then gets offered a Broadway role as Prince Albert. Grow up! In a play called Time Remembered, and he wins his first Tony Award. He's married to a Sybil Burton, and I'm going to read you this. On the 10th of September, 1957, a day before he left for New York for Broadway, Burton's wife Sybil gave birth to their first child, Kate Burton, who would go on to become an acclaimed actress in her own right, winning fame for her performance in Shonda Rhimes' drama series Grey's Anatomy as Dr. Ellis Grey. Pop culture is fascinating. And she's the VP in Scandal. I talked about the other guy. Okay. However, Kate Burton was born in 1957, but Elizabeth Taylor and Richard met in 1953 at that party for the robe. She was 21 and he was 28. The party, by the way, was held at the home of Gene Simmons and Stuart Granger. Those are like old Hollywood icons, and I know that I have to say that, but Richard Burton describes the first time he saw Elizabeth Taylor. A girl sitting on the other side of the pool lowered her book. So, this is not the inspo for every Wattpad I've ever heard about, never read, but a girl sitting at the other side of the pool lowered her book, took off her sunglasses, and looked at me. She was also preggers, okay? She was so extraordinarily beautiful that I nearly laughed out loud. Oh my God, kill me. You know when you look at somebody and like, you're so stupid fine. Like, you're so stupid hot. Like, every time I see Jason Momoa, I'm like, get out of my face. You're made up, okay? She was so unquestioningly gorgeous. She was a dark, unyielding largess. She was, in short, too bloody. And Elizabeth Taylor told everybody at the party that he was swaggering and vulgar. And I wouldn't use that today, but it still hurts. I can feel, if somebody called me swaggering and vulgar, I would say, oh, that's fine. I'm just never leaving my house again. That's fine. In 1960, years after meeting each other for the first time, they both sign on to do Cleopatra. Elizabeth Taylor is Cleopatra, and Richard Burton is Mark Antony. I make that mistake a lot because, yes, as a very young child, I did think Cleopatra was in love with our Puerto Rican songbird. Because when you're a child, time is not real, only love. There was a huge budget for this movie. And so many issues, so much drama. Stop yelling at me. Part 3. These are 10 minutes, okay? These are 10 minutes. So they get Cleopatra. There's a huge budget for this film. So Elizabeth Taylor is being paid $1 million for this film, which is equal to $10 million, and she gets 10% of profits from the studio. And listen to this. As well as shooting the film in Todd AO, a widescreen format, for which she had, for which she had inherited the rights from Mike Todd. Mike, are you here? I'm just telling the story. Richard Burton is paid $250K for the film, which is like a little bit over $2 million in today's cash money. They meet on set January 22nd, 1967. Richard Burton walks up to Elizabeth Taylor and says, "Has anybody ever told you you're a very pretty girl?"
No.
So in her memoir, Elizabeth Taylor, by Elizabeth Taylor, says that she exclaimed to her friends, "Oi, Gewalt," which I don't know what that means. Because of the oi, I'm guessing it's Yiddish, but she's not Jewish, whatever. She says, "Here's the great lover, the great wit, the great intellectual of Wales." And he comes out with a line like that. That's the key, dude. To never be impressed. To never be impressed. And that's what it is. You don't impress me much, bitch. I mean, well, that being said, not only was he trying to be condescending towards her, Richard Burton apparently was painfully hungover his first day on set. He was saying Welsh words for other words. He was stumbling over his lines. And Miss Taylor found it endearing. That's the key. To not expect too much. That's the key. That's what it is. He was such a slob, she said later. He was such a mess. And I looked into those green eyes that were twinkling. Girl, stand up. Twinkling and smiling at me. And he drank the whole mug and we kept staring at each other. She remembered being so close to him, seeing the grog blossoms, the burst blood vessels on his face of a heavy drinker, and strangely falling for him in that moment. Girl, I fucking get it. I fucking get it. God damn it. He was not the arrogant stage actor she had imagined. Instead, he was achingly vulnerable because she loves a weak man. I get it, girl. I would give anything to get it less. You know what I mean? Richard Burton says the moment he saw her on set, he was madly and deeply in love with her. "I fell in love at once," Richard said later. "She was like a mirage of beauty of the ages, irresistible like the pull of gravity." You drunks and your poetry, I swear to fucking God. According to the producers, quote, "In their first deep kiss in Cleopatra's boudoir, Burton found himself caught up, almost drugged in her presence. They repeated the scene several times, their kissing lasting longer with each take. Finally, the director, Joseph Mankiewicz, shouted, 'Print it!' But the scene continued. 'Would you two mind if I say cut?' he asked again. And then finally, 'Does it interest you two that it's time for lunch?' They kept making out. Kill me. No, Tefi. It's dangerous. But I love him. Okay. Later that day, Richard Burton moved Elizabeth Taylor's chair next to his. And in Elizabeth Taylor's memoir, it says, "He moved my chair next to his that day, and it would remain there for the next 13 years. The production of this movie went so over budget that Fox almost went bankrupt. Also, they kept burning money because they would film parts of the movie and then say, and then refilm that whole fucking thing again. And they kept hiring and firing directors. And apparently they recasted Mark Antony at one point too, but then they're and then went back to. Also, this was being filmed in England and the weather was so bad apparently that Elizabeth Taylor got pneumonia and almost killed her. So filming had to stop for a while until she got better, and then she came back to set. And then they hated everything that they filmed in England and then decided to scrap it all and start in Rome. Crazy. All the while they're having this scandal of an obsessive affair that's on and off, on and off. The media nicknamed it Le Scandale. Also get this. At one point, her fourth husband, Eddie Fisher, calls his house to talk to Elizabeth Taylor. And Richard Burton picks up the phone. And Eddie Fisher goes, "What are you doing in my house?" And Richard Burton, this is a real story. Richard Burton responded, "What do you think I'm doing? I'm fucking your wife." Elizabeth Taylor also had 2 attempts to hurt her, to not be on this earth anymore during the filming of Cleopatra. One of the attempts was because she tried to call off the affair with Richard, because she was one of the biggest stars in the world, and she didn't want to do this, and she knew what the media was saying about her, and she couldn't do this again, or whatever. So she took a TW, handful of sleeping pills, but, you know, thank God it didn't work. One time, Eddie Fisher showed up to where she was sleeping, and she woke up and he had a firearm, a gun, over her head, and he said, "Don't worry, Elizabeth, I won't kill you. You're too beautiful." Ugh. When they weren't filming, they would get a villa and just stay up all night drinking and playing Scrabble. And Elizabeth Taylor said, when you get aroused playing Scrabble, that's when you know it's love. I can't play Scrabble. I don't do well under that kind of pressure. Fox's future was dependent on this film because they spent $40 million on this film. So $40 million in the 60s is not $40 million today. I tried to math for you. It's just not happening. Let me know in the comments how much that is today. Okay, here's a fact sheet. Despite the fact that Cleopatra became the biggest box office success of 1963 in the United States, and the film grossed $15.7 million at the box office, which is $138,962,065 in today's money, it took several years for the film to earn back its production costs, which nearly drove Fox to bankruptcy. Marge, please, mommy's working. I'm sorry. The studio publicly blamed Taylor for the production's troubles and unsuccessfully sued Burton and Taylor for allegedly damaging the film's commercial prospects with their behavior. You and your boyfriend ruined this for us. So even though Elizabeth Taylor calls Cleopatra a very low point in her career, the film did win 4 Academy Awards. March 15th, 1964, 9 days after Eddie Fisher's divorce from Elizabeth Taylor was finalized, they got married. He at this point was already divorced from Sybil, and they were married at the Ritz-Carlton in Montreal. She was 32 and he was 38. So Elizabeth Taylor's wedding look is iconic, and her jewelry collection is legendary. And Richard Burton said, the only word Elizabeth knows in Italian is Bulgari. He later followed that up with a 69-carat ring from Cartier. So, yeah. The wedding was a very low-key affair, probably because they were worried about backlash. As years went on, they jet-setted around the world, and crowds would gather to get a glimpse of the jet-setting couple. A couple so notorious that they were condemned by the Vatican in an open letter in the Vatican City's weekly newsletter. Elizabeth was charged with erotic vagrancy because she was sleeping with Burton while still married to Fisher. But no mention of Sybil, of course. The Vatican called it this insult to the nobility of the hearth. Whatever the fuck that means. I mean, did you see her ring? Whatever. This affair is bookmarked in society as the beginning of the world's obsession with celebrity. Richard Burton told the publicist for Cleopatra, I've had affairs before, but I didn't know she was so fucking famous. An actor was with them in New York, and this is what he had to say. As the limousine picked up speed, Elizabeth sweetly smiled and waved to the crowd like royalty, all the while silently mouthing the words, fuck you, and you, and you, and you, and you. Here's another asterisk. An appalled Lawrence Oliver, with whom Burton allegedly had a fling as a young actor, per Furious Love, though Burton's family have denied that he was homosexual, telegrammed his old friend, make up your mind. Do you want to be a great actor or a household whore? And Richard responded and said both. But the studios are not stupid and started casting them in more and more and more movies together because they knew that people would pay to see them together in a movie. They were in a movie called VIPs, which mirrored the headlines about them, with Taylor playing a famous model attempting to leave her husband for a lover, and Burton her estranged millionaire husband. And then she also was in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. And Elizabeth Taylor received her 2nd Academy Award, BAFTA, and National Board of Review and New York City Film Critics Circle Award. Part 4, Richard Burton, Elizabeth Taylor. Also, a really, really, really good movie that they both star in is The Taming of the Shrew. And I watched that in class in 7th grade. What year? Mind your fucking business. So what Elizabeth and Richard Burton got the most hate for was their lifestyle. They lived an extremely, extremely lavish lifestyle. A lifestyle I doubt any of us will live. Because it's just not necessary. It's what they did was crazy. Look how Olive writes. Okay. The Burtons' extravagant spending would shock even the most jaded oligarch. Royal. Richard Burton used a $1.2 million check as a bookmark. He bought a $960,000 plane on a whim for Elizabeth. They flew on the plane to go to Paris, and Richard said, I want it. So they owned property in Switzerland. They owned property in Ireland. They owned property in Puerto Vallarta. They had this floating palace called Kalitzma. They owned various Monets and Picassos. They owned Rembrandts and all of it. By the way, their floating palace was this boat. They lived on a boat. Richard loved this boat. But their most lavish of spending was on jewelry. Liz had an insatiable appetite for jewelry. She could not get enough of it. Her jewelry collection. Richard Burton says, I introduced Elizabeth to beer, and she introduced me to Bulgari. Richard Burton would often joke that he was in several bidding wars with Aristotle Onassis, who later married Jackie. And somebody in my family went on a date once with Jackie O. So, I don't know why I brought that up. A quote for you. When Elizabeth discovered that Onassis had presented Mrs. Kennedy with £500,000 worth of rubies surrounded by diamonds, keeping up with the Onassises became a mild obsession of hers. Now the battle of the rubies is on, Richard noted. I wonder who'll win. It will be a long war, and the idea has already been implanted that I shouldn't let myself be outdone by a bloody Greek. Jesus. I can be as vulgar as he can. Okay. One time, they were at the penthouse at the Caesar's palace. Did the real Caesar stay here? Richard had gotten his hands on Le Peregrina. It's a pearl that was once owned by Spanish royals. The Bonapartes. It was owned by the Bonapartes, a very, very famous Spanish royal family, okay? He presented her this pearl, and the pearl fell off this dainty diamond necklace, and they got on all fours and started looking for this pearl. While they're on the floor searching for this pearl, she notices that her puppy is gnawing on a bone, which she thought was really weird because they never give their puppies bones. She runs over to the puppy, opens its mouth, and there's the pearl unscratched. He also bought her the Krupp diamond. Here it is. Now it's known as the Taylor Burton diamond. He bought it for $1 million and some change. And so with this necklace, Richard Burton set the record for a publicly sold diamond. And they apparently fought like animals. Here's a quote from Elizabeth Taylor's memoir, Elizabeth Taylor. Richard loses his temper with true enjoyment. It's beautiful to watch. Oh, she is devilish. Our fights are delightful screaming matches, and Richard is rather like a small atom bomb going off. Richard Burton agreed. We live out for the benefit of the mob, the sort of idiocies they've come to expect. Oh, he's talking about the paparazzi and society. We will often pitch a battle purely for the exercise. You guys are sick. You're sick. I will accuse her of being ugly. She will accuse me of being a talentless son of a bitch. And this sort of frightens people. I love arguing with Elizabeth, except when she is in the nude. He is funny. That would make me chuckle. Richard Burton has a book called Furious Love, and he says this. Elizabeth learned about a couple staying at the Regency Hotel who took the suite below theirs just so they could eavesdrop on the Burtons' battles royale. They reportedly climbed up on chairs, placed empty glasses against the ceiling, and listened in. And Elizabeth says, well, they got an earful, but what the poor schmoes didn't know was that it was a vocal exercise. They're witty. I like them. I hate them. I want it. I don't want it at all. I could have it, alas. But as Elizabeth Taylor's addiction to pills worsened, so did their fights. Richard Burton was also suffering from late-stage alcoholism, and he also had an affair with someone he was on set with, Natalie Dillon. Here she is. The lifestyle, the fighting, the affair eventually tore them apart and they get divorced. You know what I love about this photo? She's so teehee, teehee, you know? So it's 1974, a month before they were supposed to get divorced, okay? Elizabeth Taylor writes this. My darling and still my husband, I wish I could tell you of my love for you, of my fear, my delight, my pure animal pleasure of you, with you, my jealousy, my pride, my anger at you at times, most of all my love for you, and whatever love you can dole out to me. I wish I could write about it, but I can't. I can only boil and bubble inside and hope you understand how I really feel. Anyway, I lust thee, your still wife. P.S. Oh love, let us never take each other for granted again. P.P.S. How about that? 10 years. I love the way they talk to each other. It's very Shakespearean, very dramatic, very toxic. They divorce. It's horrible. They never speak again. Just kidding. They get married in 1975. They get remarried. The ceremony is held by a river in Botswana. This is from her diary entry. We exchanged rings, fathomless looks, and were married once again, back where we belonged, always belonged. And then she wrote him a letter after they were married again. Dear husband, how about that? You really are my husband again, and I have news for you. There will be bloody no more marriages or divorces. We are stuck like chicken feathers to tar, for lovely always. Do you realize that we shall grow old together? And I know the best is yet to be. Anyway, my little big one. Oh, I love that. I'm going to take that. My little big one, I love you and have a deep tranquility in my heart. And the tug of love is over and we are one once more. I'm happy. I hope you are. Yours truly, wife. The end. 10 months later, they get a divorce. And Elizabeth Taylor is recorded saying, I love him with every fiber of my soul, but we can't be together. At this point, their careers were really in a decline. A month after his divorce from Elizabeth Taylor, he marries someone else. Motherfucker. He marries model Susie Miller. Here they are together. Susie and Richard break up, and then 1983, till Richard's death, he's married to production assistant Sally Hay. And they eventually all became friends. Actually, in 1983, Elizabeth and Richard starred in something else together. The year he married Sally, Elizabeth and Richard were in a play about a divorced couple that reconnect, you know. But Elizabeth Taylor was not well and missed a few shows. It was actually during one of the shows that she was sick for that he married Sally. He's a real motherfucker. Okay. So he marries Sally in 1983. In 1984, on August 5th, he suffers a cerebral hemorrhage and dies in his sleep in one of his Swiss homes. And Elizabeth Taylor did not attend any of the memorials or services in Wales because Sally didn't want, it to be this news storm, this paparazzi storm. And Sally was like, I don't want all the attention to be Elizabeth Taylor attending Richard Burton's funeral and not Richard Burton's funeral, which I understand. Look at this. Elizabeth Taylor later said, Richard did write me one last letter before he died. Okay, I'm going to read it to you. Taylor said Burton sent one last letter shortly before his death, though his widow has denied that this was possible. According to Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton expressed his desire to come home to her, and she shared his sentiments. She said in an interview with Vogue, I was still madly in love with him the day he died, and I think he loved me too. The letter was reportedly buried with Taylor when she died in 2011. And then the news was like, oh my God, he left all of his money, 2.7 million or whatever, left all of his money to Sally and nothing to Elizabeth Taylor. Elizabeth Taylor did not need it. Okay? She still has the Taylor Burton diamond. Whatever. Anyway, love story for the ages. Iconic, torrid, horrible. I wish this kind of love on no one but everyone, And I do think, that they were that teenage dream that Katy Perry was talking about. It's just that sometimes you gotta grow up,